My name is Ebner Whittle, and at 72 I thought I had seen every storm life could throw at me. But nothing prepared me for the day my own daughter told me I wasn't welcome in the house I'd worked 40 years to build just because I lost my job. One moment I was a father and grandfather. The next, I was nothing more than a burden to be pushed out into the cold. What she didn't know was that a single crumpled dollar in my pocket would soon turn into 5 million rewriting everything she thought she controlled. Before we begin this story, I want to ask, where are you watching from, and how old are you? Please subscribe to Revenge Untold to hear more unforgettable stories like mine. At 72, I never imagined I would be told I was useless. The words cut deeper than the cold Halifax wind. For nearly 5 decades, I had given everything to my job: long nights, aching bones, missed birthdays, believing loyalty and hard work meant something. That morning, my manager, young enough to be my grandson, sat across from me with that thin smile people wear when they think they're doing you a favor. "Mr. Whittle, we're moving to automation. Your position is no longer necessary." Just like that, 47 years reduced to a line item on a budget sheet. I walked out with my dignity intact, but inside I felt hollow. I wasn't just losing a paycheck, I was losing the identity I had built my life around. As I trudged home, the weight of the news pressed harder than the chill in my chest. Every step echoed with questions I couldn't answer. How would I tell Hazel, my only daughter, the one I had raised through every hardship? How would I look at River and Lane, my grandchildren, who still thought Grandpa could fix anything I wanted to believe they'd rally around me? But deep down, I feared Hazel's reaction. She had grown used to depending on my paycheck, not realizing how fragile the balance really was. When I opened the front door, the silence in the house felt heavy. Usually, Hazel would be watching her soap operas, the kids running through the hall with laughter that made this old house feel alive. But today, it was quiet, almost warning me of what was to come. I sat at the kitchen table, clutching a glass of water, rehearsing the words in my head. I would tell her calmly, explain the situation, suggest that maybe, just maybe, she could step up and find work herself. The door slammed, shaking the frame. Hazel's voice filled the house, sharp, impatient, scolding River for not watching his younger sister. Then she stepped into the kitchen, her arms folded, her expression already demanding answers. "Why are you home at this hour, Daddy?" I swallowed hard. "We need to talk, Hazel." The words were barely out before the storm began. When I told her I had been downsized, her face twisted, not with sympathy, but with fear and then rage. She didn't ask if I was all right. She didn't thank me for decades of sacrifice. Instead, she snapped, "How are we going to live now? Your pension won't cover half our expenses." I tried to reason with her, to suggest she could look for a part-time job, that River was old enough to watch Lane after school. But the very word job sent her into a frenzy. "At 39, you expect me to wait tables? Are you kidding?" Her voice rose sharp enough to slice through the walls. What hurt most wasn't the shouting. It was the contempt in her eyes. I had given her everything I could: college tuition, a wedding, even money for her divorce. And now, with one piece of bad news, I wasn't a father anymore. I was a liability. I sat there in silence, my chest tight, realizing this conversation wasn't about my job at all. It was about how little value my own daughter saw in me once the money was gone. Hazel's voice grew sharper with every sentence, like each word was meant to chip away at what little pride I had left. "You had one job, Daddy," she spat, "to provide, and now you've ruined everything." I sat there, stunned, the glass of water in front of me, trembling slightly in my hand. After nearly half a century of working, was this what I had become in her eyes? A failure, a burden, Hazel? I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, "I didn't ruin anything. The company made a decision. They're replacing inspectors with machines. It wasn't my choice. She crossed her arms tighter, her tone dripping with accusation. So other men kept their jobs, but not you. That means they fought harder. That means they had more value than you. The words sliced through me. I wanted to argue to remind her that I had been loyal, that younger men had come and gone while I stayed. But she wasn't listening for the truth. She was looking for someone to blame, and I was the easiest target. "Mom, stop it." River's voice broke through the tension. He had been standing in the doorway with Lane clinging to his arm, her wide eyes full of fear. At just 14, River had more courage in that moment than his mother. "It's not Grandpa's fault. He worked his whole life for us." Hazel whipped her head toward him, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "Go to your room, River. This is an adult conversation." "But Mom, in your room." Now she barked, her voice so sharp that Lane flinched. River clenched his jaw, but he obeyed, pulling his sister down the hall. She glanced back at me with tear-filled eyes, and I tried to give her the smallest smile of reassurance. But I couldn't fool her. She saw the truth in my face. The moment they were gone, Hazel turned back to me, her expression harder than stone. "You think saving money will fix this? Lane has ballet lessons that need paying. River's uniform isn't cheap. And I was supposed to start a massage course next month. How do you expect me to do any of that now?" Her voice rose into a shrill pitch, her arms flailing with every word, as if the chaos in her movements could hide the cold calculation behind them. "I will not live counting pennies like some beggar. That's not why I came back here after the divorce. You promised me security. You promised me stability." I felt something inside me crack. "Hazel," I said softly, "I've given everything I had to keep you and the kids safe. I renovated this house for you, moved myself into a small back room so you could have the best space. I even spent my savings on your lawyer when Grant left. Don't tell me I haven't sacrificed." For a split second, I thought I saw hesitation flicker across her face, but then it hardened again. "So now it's my fault you're broke. That's what you're saying." I shook my head slowly. "No. I'm saying we all need to adjust. We can get by if we work together." Her laughter was bitter, almost cruel. "Work together? Be realistic, Daddy. At 72, who would even hire you? No one needs you anymore. And I am not going to waste my life flipping burgers in some greasy diner." Her words weren't just cruel, they were a sentence. For the first time, I realized my daughter didn't see me as family anymore. She saw me as a broken tool, no longer useful now that I couldn't provide. And in that moment, sitting across the kitchen table from the girl I had once carried on my shoulders through the park, I understood something devastating. Love in her eyes had always been conditional. I stared at Hazel, my chest tight, trying to believe this was the same little girl who once begged me to push her on the swings until the sun went down. But the woman across from me wasn't that child anymore. Her face was hard, her voice sharp as glass. "You talk about sacrifice, Daddy, but sacrifice doesn't pay bills. Sacrifice doesn't buy ballet shoes or uniforms. Sacrifice doesn't keep food on the table." I set the glass down carefully, afraid my shaking hands would betray me. "Hazel, I can't create money out of thin air. My pension is small, yes, but it's steady. We can make it work." "And you stop right there," she snapped, slamming her palm on the table. "Don't you dare suggest I get a job. Do you know what it would look like, me serving coffee in some rundown cafe? I deserve better than that." Her words echoed through the kitchen like thunder shaking something deep inside me. I looked at her, truly looked, and realized this conversation wasn't about fear. It was about entitlement. She didn't want to face hardship. She wanted me to shoulder it alone like always. I tried one last time, my voice breaking with quiet desperation. Hazel, sometimes we all have to do things we don't want for the sake of our children. Isn't their future worth a little pride? She recoiled as if I had insulted her. Don't you dare tell me how to raise my kids. I've done everything for them, everything, and you. You're just a selfish old man who failed at the one thing he was supposed to do. Those words nearly stopped my heart. For years, I had denied myself everything, new clothes, hobbies, even medicine, just so she and the kids could have more. And now, with one cruel sentence, all of that was erased. I stood slowly, hoping to calm the storm. Hazel, please. Let's not do this. We can figure something out. She interrupted, her voice dropping into something cold and final. There's nothing to figure out. If you can't provide, you don't belong here. Her words hit me like a blow. I thought I had misheard, but the expression on her face told me I hadn't. What do you mean? I asked, my throat dry. I mean, she said, enunciating each word as if she were spelling out a lesson for a child. You should leave. Find somewhere else to live. This house belongs to me and the kids now. I felt the blood drain from my face. Hazel, this is my home. I've lived here 40 years. My name is on the deed. She shrugged, utterly unbothered. That's just a formality. You can sign it over to me. After all I've been through, it's only fair. I staggered back, clutching the edge of the table for balance. My daughter, my flesh and blood, was telling me I was no longer welcome in the very house I built with my own hands. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just unemployed, I was unwanted. Her words echoed in my ears long after they were spoken. Find somewhere else to live. I sat frozen, the room spinning around me. My home, 40 years of mortgage payments, repairs, holidays, and memories suddenly stripped from me, as if it were nothing more than a chair she could rearrange. You can't be serious, Hazel, I whispered. I've never been more serious, she replied coldly. The children need stability. They have school here, friends here. You can manage on your pension somewhere smaller. This house should stay with us. Her calmness stung worse than her yelling. She wasn't acting out of anger anymore. This was calculation. She wanted my house plain and simple. I won't sign it over, I said firmly. This is my only asset, my insurance for old age. Her lip curled. So you choose bricks and wood over your grandchildren's future. That's who you are. A selfish old man clinging to a piece of property, I almost laughed. Though nothing about it was funny. Selfish, I had given up everything for her. Her college tuition she never finished. A wedding I knew would end in heartbreak. Her endless requests during her divorce. I had carried her burdens until my back nearly broke, and now she dared to call me selfish. I raised my voice, something I rarely did. Enough, Hazel. Respect is a two-way street. I've been your father every single day of your life, even when your mother died and the world fell apart. I stood tall. I paid the bills. I kept us together, and this is how you repay me. Her face twisted with rage. Stop listing what you've done. It was your duty as a father. Don't expect me to worship you for doing the bare minimum. Her words struck harder than any fist. I saw now there was no bridge left to mend. Hazel didn't want my advice, my love, or my presence. She wanted my money, my house, my usefulness. Nothing more. The house fell silent. River and Lane peeked from their rooms, their eyes wide, sensing something final was happening. I forced my voice to steady. Are you really saying you don't want me here? Yes, Hazel answered without hesitation. Pack your things. I'll call a lawyer tomorrow about the deed transfer. This is our home now. I rose from the table, my legs trembling. In my small back room, I pulled out an old travel bag. Into it, I placed the bare necessities, one change of clothes, a razor, my toothbrush, and the medications I sometimes skipped because money was tight. My hands moved mechanically, but my heart felt hollow. When I stepped into the hallway, River was waiting. His eyes glistened. "Grandpa, where are you going?" I forced a weak smile. "Just for a while, son. It'll be better this way." "No, it's not right," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It's not your fault." Lane's small voice followed from her doorway. "Is Grandpa leaving?" Before I could answer, Hazel's voice cut through like ice. "Children, go to your rooms." River tried to protest, but Hazel snapped, "Now." The children disappeared reluctantly, and I was left standing with my daughter, my bag in hand, my dignity hanging by a thread. "Have you got any money?" she asked, her tone flat. I patted my pocket. $5, that was all. "Enough for a hostel tonight," I said quietly. "Good," she replied, opening the door wide. "You know the way out." I looked at her one last time, searching for even a flicker of the girl I once knew. But her eyes were stone, and so with my bag over my shoulder and $5 in my pocket, I stepped into the night, exiled from the very home I built. The night air cut through me like a blade as I stepped off the porch. The door slammed behind me, and just like that, I was no longer a father, no longer a provider, no longer welcome. My house, my sanctuary of 40 years, stood behind me like a stranger, its windows glowing warm for them while the cold swallowed me whole. I tightened my grip on the bag, forcing myself to keep walking one foot in front of the other, though every step felt like I was dragging chains. I didn't wander far. Pride wouldn't let me sleep on a park bench, but desperation drove me into the first cheap place I could find. The Seabreeze hostel was wedged between a laundromat and a grocery store, a tired brick building sagging with age. Inside, the receptionist, a woman with dyed red hair and tired eyes, looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and habit. "A room for one is $30 a night," she said. "Shared bath at the end of the hall. Bed in the common rooms, 15. I pulled the worn leather wallet from my pocket and counted one crumpled $5 bill. That was all I had left. My throat tightened as I looked up at her. "Do you have anything cheaper?" She studied me for a moment, her gaze lingering on my bag, my suit that had seen better days, and the way I couldn't meet her eyes. Then her voice softened. "We have a recreation room, couch in the corner, $5. Shame washed over me hot and heavy, but I nodded. "I'll take it." The room was little more than a lounge with a sagging sofa, a flickering TV, and a few old magazines. Still, it was a roof over my head, and tonight that was more than I had expected. I sank into the couch, setting my bag at my feet. For the first time in years, I was utterly alone. No wife, no daughter, no home. Just me and the silence. That's when I saw it sitting beneath the television, a stack of lottery tickets for sale with a sign, "Try your luck. $1." I almost laughed. For years, I'd scolded Hazel for wasting money on scratch-offs or draw tickets. "It's a tax on people who can't do math," I'd tell her. And yet here I was, with $5 to my name, staring at the chance to trade one of them for a dream. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Logic said to save the bill for food, to stretch it for survival. But another voice whispered, "What do you have to lose?" I sat there, torn, the weight of the day pressing me into the couch. Images flashed before my eyes. Hazel at 5 years old with pigtails. Hazel at 18 in her cap and gown. Hazel at 39 telling me I wasn't needed anymore. My hands trembled as I reached into my pocket and pulled out the loan bill. When I walked back to the front desk, the woman looked surprised. "Changed your mind?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Give me one ticket." "Golden Kush." The one with the big jackpot. She slid it across the counter, a thin slip of paper that felt oddly heavy in my hand. I carried it back to the sofa like it was both a joke and a lifeline. $5 for a roof or $5 for a chance. Tonight, I had chosen the chance. And though I didn't know it yet, that decision would turn my world upside down. I didn't sleep much that night. The hostel's sofa sagged under my weight, and every creak of the old building reminded me how far I had fallen in a single day. My mind kept replaying Hazel's words. "We don't need you without money." It was like a hammer striking over and over, leaving me raw and hollow. At some point, I drifted off, the lottery ticket clutched in my hand like a lifeline. When I woke, the faint glow of the TV illuminated the room. Faye, the receptionist, stood there with a remote in her hand. "Drawing's about to start," she said with a small smile. "Thought you might want to watch." I blinked at her, disoriented, then looked down at the ticket. 6 printed numbers: 8, 17, 22, 31, 45, 59. I had scoffed at these things my whole life, but tonight, with nothing else left, those numbers were all I had. The announcer's voice rang out, "Tonight's Golden Cush jackpot, $5 million. I chuckled bitterly under my breath. The odds were 1 in 42 million. People played for decades and never came close. But as the machine spun and the first ball dropped, my breath caught. 8. I stared. The first number matched. Coincidence, I told myself. Just luck. The second ball rolled out. 45. My heart thudded in my chest. 2 for 2. Faye leaned forward, her eyes wide. "Do your numbers match?" I nodded slowly, my lips too dry to speak. The third ball clattered out. 22. I gripped the ticket so hard it crumpled. 3 for 3. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. 59. The fourth. Faye gasped. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled uncontrollably. 31. The fifth. My chest burned as though the air itself refused to enter. And then, after what felt like a lifetime, the announcer's voice delivered the last number. 17. I went cold. All 6. Every number. My ticket, the same one I bought with my last dollar, was the winning ticket. Faye jumped up, clapping her hands. "You did it. You actually won." Her laughter filled the room, joyous and disbelieving. But I couldn't move. My entire body froze. $5 million. That wasn't real. That wasn't something that happened to men like me. Yet the ticket in my hand said otherwise. "Call them," Faye urged, shoving her phone into my trembling hand. "There's a number right there. Call and confirm." I dialed my voice, barely a whisper, when the operator answered. She took my information, checked the database, and then said the words that made the world tilt. "Yes, Mr. Whittle, you are the official winner. Congratulations on your $5 million jackpot." I lowered the phone, slowly, staring into nothing. I had walked out of my own home with $5 and a broken heart. And now, with that same 5, I had bought freedom. Hazel's voice echoed in my head again. "We don't need you without money." I finally smiled, the first real smile in months, because now, for the first time in my life, I didn't need her either. The next morning, I woke with the same disbelief I had fallen asleep with. The ticket lay on the nightstand, and before I even stretched my legs, I snatched it up to make sure it was still real. The numbers hadn't changed. I rubbed my eyes and whispered to myself, 3.2 million after taxes. The operator had explained it on the phone. If I chose the lump sum, that was the amount I'd receive. More money than I had ever dreamed of, let alone held. Faye greeted me in the lobby with a steaming cup of coffee. Ready to become a millionaire officially, she teased, her smile soft but encouraging. For a woman I had only met yesterday, she carried herself like an old friend. The Golden Cush office was in downtown Halifax, a towering glass building that seemed almost hostile in its sleek perfection. Inside, I was ushered into a private room where two men in tailored suits introduced themselves. "Mr. Whittle, congratulations," one said, shaking my hand with practiced enthusiasm. "I'm Terrence Blackwood, director. This is Alan Forrester, financial advisor." They verified my ID, scanned the ticket, and after a series of forms and signatures, I could barely follow. Forrester leaned forward. "Now you can choose the annual payout over 20 years, or a one-time lump sum. The latter will be about $3.2 million after taxes." My mind flashed back to Hazel's sneer, "Who would hire you at 72? I straightened my shoulders. I want it all. Now. Forrester didn't flinch. He nodded and slid a business card across the table. "I recommend you contact Nicholas Wood. He specializes in helping lottery winners manage their funds. Trust me, sudden wealth can destroy as quickly as it can build." For 2 hours, I scribbled my name on paperwork until my hand cramped. When it was finally over, they handed me a certificate embossed with gold. "Winner Golden Cush Jackpot." The reality slammed into me like a wave. I wasn't poor anymore. I wasn't cast aside. I was free. As Faye and I stepped back into the crisp Halifax air, she surprised me with a hug. "I'm so happy for you," she said. "You deserve this." Her words lingered with me. Deserve, did I? After all, I had worked for nearly 50 years, raised a daughter alone after my wife passed, carried burdens that no one saw. Maybe luck had finally decided I'd earned a reprieve. That night alone in the small hostel room, I opened a fresh bank account, the certificate safely tucked into a folder. My thoughts drifted to Hazel. I imagined her face when she learned I wasn't penniless, but wealthier than I had ever been. Would she come crawling back? Would she pretend none of her cruel words had ever been spoken? For the first time in years, I realized I didn't care. I no longer needed her approval, her dependence, her manipulation. My future was mine alone to build. As I closed my eyes, a single word carried me into sleep: freedom. The certificate sat on the desk in front of me, its gold seal gleaming under the morning sun that streamed through the hostel window. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof that I had a second chance. After decades of working, scraping, and sacrificing, I had been handed something I never thought possible: freedom. I met with Nicholas Wood, the financial advisor recommended to me, in a quiet Halifax office lined with shelves of books and awards. He wasn't flashy, no sharp suit or slick smile, just a calm man with kind eyes who listened more than he spoke. "The worst thing you can do, Mr. Whittle," he told me, "is spend this money like it's endless. You'll need a plan." I nodded. "I don't want yachts or fancy cars. I just want a place to live out the rest of my days in peace." He smiled knowingly. "That's a good start. Think about where you'd feel happiest. A quiet place away from the noise and, perhaps, away from certain people." His eyes flicked up as if he already knew about Hazel. "Exactly," I admitted. "I don't want to bump into reminders of the past every time I buy groceries. I want something new. Something mine." Within days, I was meeting with a realtor who specialized in coastal properties. We drove along winding roads, passing small fishing towns and sleepy harbors. Every house we toured seemed to whisper stories of solitude and fresh beginnings. But nothing struck me until we pulled up to Moonlight Bay. The ocean stretched wide and restless waves pounding against the rocky shoreline. On a gentle slope above, the water stood a 2-story home with white siding and broad windows that reflected the endless blue. It wasn't extravagant, but it was sturdy, warm, and inviting. Inside, the living room opened up with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sea. I could almost see myself there already, coffee in hand, the morning sun rising over the horizon. No voices raised in blame or scorn, just the sound of waves and gulls. "This one is priced at $850,000, the realtor said. "Given the location, it's a steal." I didn't hesitate. "I'll take it." Her eyebrows shot up. "You're sure most buyers like to think things over?" "I've done enough thinking for a lifetime," I interrupted. "This is the one." Within a month, the house was mine. I spent another 100,000 renovating, replacing worn floors, painting the walls in warm earth tones, and filling the garden with roses, Eleanor's favorite. My furniture arrived piece by piece, but I didn't mind waiting. Each delivery made the house feel less like a stranger's, and more like mine. The first morning I woke there, I brewed a pot of coffee and carried it onto the back patio. The air smelled of salt and pine. The waves lapped rhythmically against the rocks below, and for the first time in years, my chest loosened. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't an old man tossed aside. I was a man reborn, standing on the shore of a new life. The first few weeks in Moonlight Bay felt like stepping into another world. I spent my mornings on the patio with coffee, watching the ocean breathe in and out like some great living thing. Afternoons were filled with small tasks, arranging bookshelves, tending roses, unpacking boxes. For the first time in decades, my schedule was my own. No manager's calls, no daughter's demands, just peace. It was on a breezy morning at the seaside cafe that I first noticed her. The cafe was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and I had already become the new man on the beach. I ordered my usual eggs Benedict and sat by the window sipping strong coffee when the bell above the door jingled. She entered with a quiet confidence, her silver hair cut short, her back straight, her steps deliberate. She scanned the room, then walked toward me. "Do you mind?" she asked, her accent faintly British, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Every other table is taken." I nodded, surprised. "Of course, please." She extended her hand. "Rowan party. I live up on the hill. The house with the blue roof, Ebner Whittle," I said, shaking her hand. "Just moved into the house by the water." Her eyes brightened with recognition. "Ah, the Jenkins place. Everyone's been whispering about who bought it. We're a small town. News travels faster than the tide." I chuckled awkwardly. "Hopefully the whispers aren't too bad." "On the contrary," she said with a smile that softened her sharp features. "They're curious. And so am I. You've stirred up the routine around here." We fell into conversation easily. She had been a literature professor before retiring, and the way she spoke about books reminded me of Eleanor, who had once filled our home with novels stacked too deep on every shelf. Rowan quoted lines of poetry as if they were old friends, and I found myself leaning in, listening, as though each word could steady the parts of me that still trembled. That evening, she invited me to join her for a walk up the hill behind her home. "The sunsets there will change how you see the world," she said. I hesitated. Politeness told me not to impose, but there was something disarmingly genuine about her. So at 7, I found myself climbing the slope beside her, the air rich with salt and pine. At the top, the view opened like a painting. The sun was lowering into the horizon, splashing gold and crimson across the water. Rowan spread out a small blanket, unpacked sandwiches, and handed me one. "You were right," I admitted, staring at the fiery sky. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Some things are better shared." We sat in companionable silence, two older souls who had known loss, now watching the world's quiet beauty unfold. For the first time since Eleanor's passing, I felt something stir that I thought was gone forever, the possibility of connection. And though I couldn't see the road ahead, I sensed that Rowan Party might become more than a neighbor. Life in Moonlight Bay settled into a rhythm that soothed every raw edge I carried with me. Rowan and I became companions in the truest sense of the word. Some mornings we'd walk the shoreline, her laughter carried by the wind as she bent to pick up seashells. Other days, she'd sit in my garden reading aloud from her favorite poems while I tended Eleanor's roses. Evenings often ended with us sharing a simple meal, the silence between us as comfortable as the conversation. For the first time in years, I felt seen not for what I could provide, but for who I was. Rowan asked about my past, but never pressed. When I told her I had worked construction inspection for nearly 5 decades, she nodded thoughtfully. Work that builds things meant to last. No wonder you carry yourself like stone. I laughed at the description, but I cherished the respect behind it. Yet even in that peace, shadows lingered. I had asked the lottery officials to keep my identity private, but secrecy has a way of unraveling. One morning, while reading the local paper at the cafe, I saw a headline: elderly Halifax resident wins $5 million. My name wasn't printed, but the town buzzed with speculation. At first I dismissed it. I was just one man among thousands in Halifax. But Hazel had sharp eyes for opportunity, and worse, a neighbor with a sharper tongue. It happened sooner than I expected. My phone rang one afternoon as Rowan and I sat on the patio watching gulls dive into the surf. The number was unfamiliar, but something in my gut clenched. Against my better judgment, I answered. Dad Hazel's voice hit me like a hammer. It had been nearly 2 months since I'd last heard it, and in an instant, the peace of Moonlight Bay felt fragile. Is that really you? She pressed her tone, wavering between surprise and demand. I didn't respond right away. My mind raced. How had she gotten this number? I know it's you, she continued. Don't bother denying it. You won the lottery, didn't you? $5 million. Why didn't you tell me? Her words dripped with indignation, as though she were the one betrayed. I gripped the arm of my chair to steady myself. How do you know it was in the news? She snapped. Mrs. Clark from across the street saw you at the lottery office, said you were with some woman. Her disdain for Rowan was already clear, even though she hadn't met her. My jaw tightened. And what of it? What does my win have to do with you? We're your family, she cried. Of course it has everything to do with us, family. The word rang hollow. I thought back to the night she shoved me out of my own house with nothing but a bag and $5. I drew a deep breath, my voice steady but cold. You told me you didn't need me without money. Now I have money, Hazel, and I don't need you. Silence followed, heavy and electric. For the first time in my life, I felt no guilt saying those words. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Hazel wasn't the kind of woman to walk away from $5 million, and the peace I had built by the ocean was about to be tested. The call replayed in my head for days, every syllable like a splinter under the skin. Hazel's voice had been filled with the same entitlement that had poisoned our last conversation, only now it was sharpened by greed. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I was happy or even alive after casting me out with nothing. No. She only wanted to know why I hadn't told her about the money. She began calling constantly. Morning, noon, and night, my phone buzzed with her number. At first I ignored them, but she was relentless. When I finally picked up, her tone switched between desperation and fury, like she was trying on different masks to see which one would break me. Dad, please think of the children, she pleaded one afternoon. River's falling behind in school. Lane needs dental work. We're drowning. You can't just abandon us. I clenched the phone tighter. Her words were carefully chosen, designed to stab at my guilt. But I had learned something in Moonlight Bay. Guilt is the leash manipulators use to keep you tethered. Hazel, I said quietly. I didn't abandon anyone. You made your choice the night you told me to leave. Her tone flipped in an instant, the sweetness evaporating. How dare you? After everything I've sacrificed, you owe us. That money should be for family. Without us, you wouldn't even have bought that ticket. Don't forget who's really responsible. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Responsible. The night she kicked me out was the reason I had bought that ticket with my last $5. Her cruelty had been the spark. In a strange way, she was right, but not in the way she thought. She wasn't entitled to my winnings. She had simply exposed her own greed. I don't owe you anything, I said firmly. I will always love River and Lane, but I won't finance your life anymore. Her scream on the other end of the line was raw, piercing. You can't do this. We are your family. If you don't share that money, you'll regret it. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the quiet waves outside my window. I should have felt shaken, but instead I felt lighter. For the first time, I had spoken the truth without apology. Still, I knew Hazel. She wouldn't stop at words. Rowan noticed the change in me that evening as we sat watching the tide roll out. You've been quieter than usual, she said gently, her hand resting on mine. Hazel knows about the money, I admitted. She won't let it go. Rowan's eyes softened with sympathy. And what will you do? I looked out at the horizon, the last streaks of sunset painting the water gold. Stand my ground, I said. For once in my life, I won't bend. But even as I spoke the words, a chill ran through me. Hazel wasn't finished, and her next move would be far more dangerous than phone calls. I knew Hazel well enough to understand that silence wasn't surrender. When her calls finally stopped, I didn't feel relief. I felt dread. Hazel wasn't the type to give up. She was the type to change tactics. And sure enough, my fears proved right. It was a rainy afternoon when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. Rowan wasn't due until dinner, and the mailman had already made his rounds. When I opened the door, my breath caught. There she was, Hazel. Her hair plastered to her face from the downpour, her clothes damp, her eyes sharp and restless. Behind her, River stood with his head bowed, and little Lane clutched his hand, shivering. Daddy, Hazel said, her lips curving into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. We finally found you. I froze in the doorway, the sound of the rain hammering the patio roof filling the silence between us. How I managed to ask, though the answer was already dawning on me. She lifted her chin proudly. I hired a private investigator. Money well spent. You didn't think you could just disappear, did you? Her words hit me harder than the storm outside. She had gone that far. Instead of rebuilding her own life, she had spent what little she had to hunt me down. River's voice was soft, almost apologetic. Hi, Grandpa. Lane peeked out from behind him, her big eyes filled with confusion. It's raining, she whispered. Can we come in? I stepped aside, unable to deny them shelter. Of course. Towels are in the bathroom, I told the children gently. They scurried off, leaving Hazel and me facing each other in the living room. She glanced around, taking in the wide windows, the polished floors, the roses in the vase by the window. Envy flickered across her face, barely hidden. Nice place, she said, running her fingers along the back of my sofa. Must have cost a fortune. I ignored the bait. Why are you here, Hazel? To see my father, she said smoothly, though her eyes betrayed her. We've missed you. Don't I cut in, my voice firm. Don't pretend this is about family. You came because of the money. Her smile slipped. And what if I did? Do you think you can keep it all for yourself while we suffer? River's grades are dropping. Lane needs braces, and I'm stuck in a cramped apartment because you refuse to help. I clenched my jaw. You kicked me out when I had nothing. Why should I open my doors now that I have something? For a moment, her mask cracked, and I saw the fury simmering beneath. Because we're blood, she hissed. Because whether you like it or not, we're your responsibility. I shook my head slowly. No, Hazel. You made it clear that my worth to you was measured in dollars. But those days are over. I will not let you drain me again. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We'll see about that. I knew then that her visit wasn't reconciliation. It was reconnaissance. She had found me once, and she wouldn't stop until she took another piece of me. The rain hadn't stopped when River and Lane came back into the living room, wrapped in towels that dwarfed their small frames. River tried to hide his discomfort, but I saw it in the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot. Lane, sweet Lane, wandered over to the display cabinet where I kept the seashells I collected on my morning walks. Grandpa, she said softly, her eyes wide with wonder. These are so pretty. Did you find them? My chest tightened. Yes, sweetheart, every one of them. When the sun comes back, I'll take you down to the beach. You can find your own. Her face lit up with a smile that warmed me in a way Hazel's presence could never steal. But Hazel's sharp voice cut through the tender moment like a knife. Don't make promises you can't keep, Dad. I turned to her slowly. I keep every promise I make to my grandchildren. She laughed bitterly, tossing her damp hair back. Promises don't pay bills. Lane needs braces. Do you know what those cost? Thousands. River's school wants new uniforms, tutors. And me, I can't get a job without retraining. All of that takes money. Your money. I clenched my fists at my sides. Hazel, I won't be manipulated. Not again. Her eyes narrowed. Manipulated, these are your grandchildren. Your blood. You're just going to sit here in your cozy house and let them go without. Lane looked between us, confused, not fully understanding. River, though, shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. Mom, he muttered, don't. Hazel ignored him, stepping closer to me. You owe them, Dad. If you won't give money for me, at least do it for the kids. They don't deserve to suffer just because you've turned selfish in your old age. The words stung not because they were true, but because they came from the mouth of the daughter I had carried on my shoulders, the little girl who once trusted me with her whole heart. She was holding her children up like shields weapons to batter my conscience. I will never let River and Lane suffer, I said quietly, meeting her glare. But I will not hand you a blank check, Hazel. If the children need something, we can discuss it directly. I'll make sure they're cared for, but I will not fund your lifestyle anymore. Her face twisted with anger, her voice dropping to a hiss. So you'll play the hero, buying their braces and uniforms while leaving me out to dry? That's not how this works. River finally spoke up, his voice firmer than I expected. It doesn't have to be about you, Mom. His words hung in the air, bold and defiant. Hazel whipped her head toward him, fury blazing in her eyes. Go to the other room, she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. River hesitated, looking at me, his eyes pleading for strength. I gave him a small nod. Reluctantly, he led Lane down the hall, leaving me alone with Hazel once more. She leaned in close, her voice cold. If you don't give me what I want, I'll make sure those kids never see you again. The threat landed heavier than any insult. She was no longer just my ungrateful daughter, she had become my adversary. Hazel's threat hung in the air, venomous and heavy. You'll never see them again. The words twisted deep into my chest. Lane's laughter, River's thoughtful questions, those were the only pieces of family I still cherished. And Hazel knew it. She wielded them like weapons, confident I would surrender rather than lose the children. But before I could answer, footsteps creaked in the hallway. River stood in the doorway, his shoulders squared, his eyes steady. He must have overheard. "Mom," he said firmly, "you don't get to decide that." Hazel whirled around her face, flushing red. "River, I told you to stay in the other room." He didn't budge. "I heard everything. You're trying to keep us from Grandpa just to get money out of him. That's not right." For a moment, Hazel looked stunned, her 14-year-old son defying her with a calmness that cut through her fury. She recovered quickly, her voice sharp as glass. "You're a child. You don't understand how the world works." River's jaw tightened. "I understand enough. Grandpa has always been there for us. You wouldn't even have a roof over your head if it weren't for him. And the way you treat him." His voice cracked, but he steadied himself. "It's cruel." I felt my throat close, my eyes stinging. He was saying the words I had longed to hear, words I thought no one in my family would ever say aloud. Hazel's face twisted, fury and embarrassment battling across her features. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she hissed. "I'm your mother. You don't take his side against me." River took a step forward, his voice low but unshaken. "I'm not taking sides. I'm telling the truth. You threw him out when he lost his job. I saw it. Lane saw it. And now you come back just because he has money. That's not love, Mom. That's greed." Hazel flinched, as though the word itself struck her. For once, she didn't have a quick retort. The room was silent except for the relentless pounding of the rain outside. I placed a hand on River's shoulder, my voice soft. "It's all right, son." "No," he said. Shaking his head, his eyes locked on his mother. "It's not all right. Grandpa doesn't deserve this. You can be mad at me, you can ground me, but I won't pretend anymore." Hazel's hands trembled at her sides. She looked at me, then her eyes burning. "You've poisoned him against me," she accused. I shook my head slowly. "No, Hazel. He just sees what you refuse to." She stared at us both for a long, tense moment, her chest rising and falling. Then she spun on her heel, calling down the hall. "Lane, get your things. We're leaving." River's eyes flicked to me, filled with silent apology, as he followed after his sister. Moments later, the door slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the house like a gunshot. I stood alone, the silence pressing in. My daughter had threatened me, tried to use the children against me, and lost her grip for now. But I knew this battle wasn't over. Hazel would be back. And next time she wouldn't come with tears or threats. She'd come with something sharper. The slam of the front door rattled the windows, echoing through the house long after Hazel's car disappeared down the wet road. I stood still, listening to the storm outside, the patter of rain mingling with the hollow quiet she had left behind. My bag sat by the entryway where I dropped it earlier, and for a moment I was carried back to that night months ago when Hazel shoved me out of my own home with nothing but $5 in my pocket. But this time was different. I wasn't the broken man who shuffled into a hostel ashamed and beaten. I was standing in my own house, bought with my own money, earned by chance, but safeguarded by wisdom. Hazel hadn't taken this from me, and she never would. Still, my chest ached. River's brave defiance played over and over in my mind. His words had cut through Hazel's venom, not with anger, but with truth. He had seen her for what she was becoming. I wondered what it must feel like for a boy that age to realize his mother's love came with conditions. My heart swelled with pride for his courage, but it broke for the burden he carried. Lane's wide, confused eyes haunted me too. She didn't fully understand, but she felt the tension, the tug-of-war she was caught in. That little girl deserved seashells and laughter, not to be a pawn in her mother's schemes. I walked through the house, the floor creaking beneath me, and paused at the window overlooking the stormy ocean. The waves crashed violently against the rocks, relentless and untamed, as if reflecting the turmoil inside me. For years I had been the rock for Hazel steady, no matter how many waves she threw against me. But now I realized I wasn't just enduring. I was changing. Rowan arrived later that evening, her umbrella blown nearly inside out by the wind. She took one look at me and knew something had happened. "They came, didn't they?" she asked softly, peeling off her wet coat. I nodded. Hazel found me, brought the children, tried to use them against me. Her eyes softened with worry, and she placed a hand on mine, and I drew a deep breath, steadying myself. I told her no. For once in my life, I didn't bend. Rowan's smile was faint but proud. "That must have taken everything out of you." "It did," I admitted, staring back out at the ocean. "But it also gave something back. Strength. Resolve. I know now that if she wants to come after me, she'll have to do more than threaten. She'll have to prove herself." Rowan squeezed my hand gently. "Then you're ready for her?" I nodded. The truth was, Hazel wasn't finished. I could feel it in my bones. The greed in her voice, the rage in her eyes, those weren't the signs of surrender. They were promises of another storm. But this time I wasn't afraid. I had a lawyer, a community, a woman at my side, and most of all, the will to protect the life I had built. Hazel had shown me her hand. Now I was ready to show her mine. 6 months had passed since Hazel showed up on my doorstep with rain in her hair and fire in her eyes. The memory of her threats still lingered, but the house no longer echoed with them. Instead, it echoed with laughter. Rowan's laughter, warm and disarming, as she read aloud from her favorite poets while I trimmed roses in the garden. Life had finally begun to feel steady. Yet even in that peace, a piece of me still longed for the grandchildren. I told myself I had made the right decision. Protecting my life from Hazel's manipulation was necessary. But every morning as I sat on the patio sipping my coffee and staring out at the waves, I thought of River's brave defiance and Lane's wide eyes filled with confusion. Then one morning, the postman delivered an envelope with handwriting I recognized instantly. Slanted, careful, almost too neat for a boy his age. River. My hands trembled as I tore it open. "Dear Grandpa," it began. "We're doing okay. Mom got a job at an insurance company. We moved into a better apartment. Lane started her dance classes. She's so happy she twirls through the living room every night. I made the school basketball team, and we won the district tournament. I know Mom doesn't like me writing, but I can't let us lose you. Lane misses your seashell stories. She even drew one of you and your friend Rowan as mermaids. Don't laugh," she insisted. I couldn't stop smiling through the tears blurring my vision. He had found a way to reach me despite Hazel's attempts to cut me out. Every word on the page carried not just updates, but defiance, a quiet rebellion against his mother's bitterness. Rowan found me at the table, the letter trembling in my hands. "Good news?" she asked softly. "Better than good," I said, handing it to her. She read it aloud, her eyes softening at River's sincerity. "That boy has more wisdom than most adults I know," she murmured. I nodded. "He's stronger than I realized. Stronger than his mother even. He sees the truth." River kept writing every 2 weeks like clockwork. Sometimes the letters were short, just a story about practice or Lane's new dance routine. Other times they were long, full of thoughts too heavy for a boy of 14. He told me how angry he was at his mother for cutting me off, but how he was trying to forgive her. He told me Lane kept a seashell by her bed, saying it made her feel closer to me. And then came the line that stopped me cold. Mom is different lately. She doesn't yell as much. She's quieter, like she's thinking. I don't know what it means. I leaned back in my chair, the words heavy. Could Hazel actually be changing? Or was this another tactic? Another mask waiting to be slipped on when it suited her? Rowan laid a gentle hand on mine. People don't change easily, she said. But sometimes life forces them to. Maybe this job, this distance, it's forcing her to see what she's lost. I gazed out at the horizon, the endless sea rolling into the sky. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't in years, hope. It was a bright spring morning when the call came. I had just returned from the garden, dirt still under my fingernails, a basket of roses and herbs balanced on my arm. Rowan was inside brewing tea, the smell of chamomile drifting through the open windows. The phone buzzed on the patio table, the screen flashing a number I hadn't seen in weeks. Hazel. For a long moment, I considered letting it ring out. Every other time she had called it had been to demand, accuse, or threaten. But something inside nudged me curiosity, or maybe the faint ember of hope River's letters had stirred. I picked it up. Dad Hazel's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Not the sharp edge I was used to, not the brittle anger that had poisoned every word before. Yes, I said carefully. I'm here. There was a pause long enough that I wondered if the line had dropped. Then she spoke, her voice trembling. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I sat down slowly, the basket of roses forgotten at my feet. Sorry, yes. Her words tumbled out quickly as if afraid she'd lose her nerve. For the way I treated you. For throwing you out of the house. For using the kids against you. All of it. I swallowed hard, unsure whether to believe her. Hazel, you've said things before. You've made promises. This isn't a promise, she interrupted, almost desperate. It's an admission. I was wrong, Dad. Completely wrong. River called me out. He told me I was toxic, just like the parents they warn about at school assemblies. I didn't want to hear it, but he was right. The image of my grandson standing tall in the doorway that stormy night came rushing back. His defiance had rattled her more than I realized. I've started seeing a counselor. Hazel continued, trying to understand why I manipulate, why I lash out. It's not an excuse, but it's something. I don't want to be that person anymore. Not for River, not for Lane, and not for you. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time in years, I thought I heard sincerity. I let the silence stretch my heart, wrestling with memory and doubt. Part of me wanted to believe her. Another part, scarred by years of disappointment, braced against false hope. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, she added quickly. I just needed you to know I recognize how awful I've been. And I am truly sorry. Rowan stepped onto the patio just then, setting the tea down. She raised her eyebrows at the sight of me, gripping the phone, my knuckles white. I mouthed, Hazel. Rowan sat beside me quietly, her hand resting on mine, steady as stone. Hazel. I said finally, my voice low, if you're serious about change, it will show in your actions, not your words. But thank you for saying it. It matters. She sniffled softly. The kids miss you. Especially River. Maybe we could see you soon. I didn't commit, not yet. But for the first time since she had driven me out, I allowed myself to feel a cautious flicker of hope. After Hazel's call, I sat on the patio for a long while, staring at the sea, as if the waves might wash away my confusion. I wasn't naive enough to think one apology erased years of manipulation, but something in her voice lingered. It wasn't the shrill demand or the bitter edge I had grown used to. It was weary, almost broken. That evening, Rowan and I sat at the kitchen table with the letter from River spread out between us. His handwriting was neat, steady, but his words carried the weight of a boy forced to grow up too quickly. "Mom's different lately," he had written. "She doesn't yell as much. She's quieter, like she's thinking." Rowan tapped her finger on that line. "She may actually be changing," she said carefully. "But the question is, do you want to risk letting her back into your life?" I rubbed my temples. I don't want Hazel back in my life the way it was before. But River and Lane, they've never stopped being mine. I can't punish them for their mother's choices. The next morning I called Hazel back. Her voice trembled when she answered, as though she hadn't expected me to return the call. "Dad, I've thought about what you said," I told her. "If you truly want to make amends, then it starts with the children. I want to see them. But it will be on my terms." There was silence on the line. Then a cautious, "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said firmly, "that I'll come to Halifax for a day visit. Neutral ground. No arguments, no demands, no money talk. Just me, River, and Lane. If you want to be there, fine. But the moment you start pushing, I'll leave." She hesitated, then whispered, "That's fair." Her quick agreement unsettled me. It was too easy. But I kept my tone steady. "Next weekend, somewhere public. A park, maybe. River can bring his basketball. Lane can show me her dance moves. That's all I want." When I hung up, my heart was pounding. I wasn't afraid of Hazel anymore, but I was afraid of being disappointed. Still, the thought of hugging River and Lane, of hearing their laughter without a phone between us, was worth the risk. Over the following days, Rowan helped me prepare, though she respected my wish to go alone. "This is a bridge you need to cross by yourself," she said gently. "But remember, you set the boundaries. Don't let her drag you back into old patterns." On the morning of the visit, I packed a small bag with snacks, a new basketball I'd bought for River, and a seashell from my collection for Lane. I wanted them to know that even in the months apart, they had never left my thoughts. As the bus rolled toward Halifax, the city skyline came into view, stirring memories I wasn't sure I wanted. Yet beneath the unease, there was a current of hope. This time I wasn't the broken man Hazel had pushed out into the night. This time I was walking back on my own terms. The park was buzzing with the sounds of a Saturday afternoon, children shrieking as they chased kites, the thump of basketballs on pavement, dogs barking while tugging their leashes. I sat on a bench beneath a maple tree, the new basketball resting at my feet, and the seashell tucked safely in my pocket. My heart thudded with the nervous anticipation of a man waiting for a verdict. Then I saw them. River, taller than when I last held him, scanning the crowd until his eyes locked on mine. Lane, her blonde hair bouncing as she skipped, waving with both hands. Behind them walked Hazel. She looked smaller. Not in stature, but in spirit. Her shoulders weren't squared with defiance. Her eyes weren't flashing with challenge. She seemed tired, almost fragile. Grandpa Lane's voice carried like a bell. She sprinted forward and threw herself into my arms. I scooped her up, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, fighting the sting in my eyes. "I missed you," she whispered. "I missed you more," I replied, pulling the seashell from my pocket. Her gasp of delight made the months of separation melt away. River came next, more reserved, but with a steady hug that spoke volumes. "Thanks for the ball," he said, lifting it with a grin. "Want to see me shoot?" I chuckled. I wouldn't miss it. For the next hour, I watched him dribble and sink shots with a confidence that reminded me of his father's younger days. Lane twirled nearby, showing me a clumsy but heartfelt dance routine. My heart swelled not with pride in what they could do, but in who they were becoming. Hazel lingered at the edges, hands shoved into her coat pockets, watching us. When River finally sat to catch his breath, she approached slowly, as though afraid to break the fragile peace. "Dad," she began, her voice low, "thank you for coming." I studied her carefully. She wasn't demanding or hostile. She was uncertain. For Hazel, that was new. I came for them, I said, nodding toward the children. I know, she whispered, glancing at Lane chasing after a pigeon. But still, thank you. We sat in silence for a few moments, watching River teach Lane how to dribble. Hazel finally spoke again, her voice trembling. I've been trying, Dad. Therapy work. I know it doesn't erase what I did, but I'm trying. Her words stirred something complicated inside me. Relief, anger, hope, doubt, all tangled together. I thought back to that night I left my house with $5 in my pocket, humiliated and discarded. And then to the night I sat on that sagging hostel sofa, clutching the lottery ticket that changed everything. If Hazel hadn't cast me out, I never would have bought it. If I hadn't bought it, I wouldn't be here now, free at peace, building a new life. Sometimes I realized you have to lose everything to find what really matters. And what mattered now wasn't money or houses. It was this moment, River's laugh echoing through the park, Lane's hand clutching mine, even Hazel's faltering attempt at redemption. I leaned back on the bench, the spring sun warming my face, and for the first time in years, I felt no bitterness. Just clarity. The visit in Halifax stayed with me for days after I returned to Moonlight Bay. I replayed the sight of Lane's arms wrapped around my neck, River's determined face as he sank basket after basket, even Hazel's quiet, almost hesitant tone. For the first time in a long while, I sensed a shift in her. Whether it was permanent or just temporary, I couldn't know, but it no longer mattered as much as it once did. When I stepped off the bus, Rowan was waiting for me. She stood by her car scarf wrapped around her shoulders, her smile soft and steady. How was it, she asked, as I slid into the passenger seat. I exhaled slowly, staring out at the ocean road. It was good, complicated, but good. The kids, they're doing well. And Hazel, she's different, at least for now. Rowan reached over her hand, resting gently on mine. And you different? I turned to her, realizing the answer even as I spoke it. Yes. I don't feel chained anymore. Not to her anger, not to her expectations. I went back on my terms, and I left on my terms. That's enough. That evening, as we sat on the patio, watching the sun sink into the Atlantic, I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. Rowan leaned against me, a book in her lap, while I nursed a cup of coffee. The sea air carried the scent of salt and roses, the ones I had planted in Eleanor's memory. It struck me then how far I had come from a broken man with $5 and a couch in a hostel to a man who had built a new life brick by brick, choice by choice. Hazel might always circle back, chasing what she thought she was owed. But I no longer felt the same fear of her shadow. I had my lawyer, my will, and above all, my resolve. She couldn't take from me what I refused to surrender: my dignity, my peace, my right to happiness. Later, Rowan closed her book and looked at me with those bright, unflinching eyes. "Do you ever regret buying that ticket?" she asked softly. I smiled. I don't think it was the ticket, Rowan. It was what it represented. A chance. Freedom. I could have won nothing, and maybe I'd still be here somehow, just slower, harder. The ticket didn't save me. Choosing myself did. She slipped her hand into mine, and together we watched the last light fade over the water. I thought of River's courage, Lane's innocent joy, Hazel's faltering apology, and I felt a strange sense of balance. The past hadn't disappeared. It never would, but it no longer ruled me. At 72, I had discovered something I'd been blind to most of my life: peace isn't given. It's claimed. And I had finally claimed mine. As the stars began to prick the night sky, I knew one truth with absolute certainty: whatever storms came next, I would never surrender this peace again. Looking back now, I realize the greatest victory of my life wasn't winning the lottery. Money may have bought me a house by the ocean roses in the garden and a sense of security, but it wasn't what healed me. What healed me was finally understanding that peace, dignity, and love are not things to be begged for or sacrificed. They're choices we must claim, even if it means walking away from those who try to use us. My daughter Hazel's betrayal cut deep, but it also forced me to face the truth. I had spent years giving without boundaries, mistaking sacrifice for love. It took losing everything to see that my worth was never tied to my wallet, but to who I am as a man, a father, and a grandfather. River and Lane reminded me of that when they chose to love me for me, not for what I could provide. So if you're listening to this story as a parent, a child, or a grandparent, ask yourself, are you valuing the people in your life for who they are, or for what they can give you? Respect, gratitude, and love are the true inheritance we pass on. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a betrayal like mine? How did you handle it, and what did you learn? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening.